Well, the U.S. economy has been marginally but steadily and gradually weakening since about the middle of last year. You see that if you look at the trend, and by trend I mean long-term moving averages of various indicators of GDP, and you also see that in the forward-looking surveys such as markets managers, purchasing manager surveys, and also some others. So it is not in a recession and probably will not enter a recession, but it's certainly slowing. And it is in that context where the question mark arises what the Fed will do next. And the current status is that they have signaled flexibility in terms of monetary policy, i.e. that they may not tighten as they had hoped for much earlier.
How is Janet Yellen likely to react? What are you expecting to hear overnight?
Well, I think the most likely scenario is that she will suggest further postponement of interest rate hikes.
And how many hikes are we talking about? I mean, anywhere from 2 to 3. Are we expecting to see that June rate hike still?
I think at the moment, yes, the majority of market participants probably would hope for or still expect a rate hike sometime in June. But personally, at least, I hope they won't do that either.
Do you think that the Fed has been too dovish?
No, I think it is too hawkish at this context in terms of its signals. I mean, if things go well, they can still go ahead and raise rates. But this thing with the box plots and communicate with the, spotting the expected interest rates for the future and communicating too much is actually confusing. What we need right now is the central bank to signal, or any central bank to signal, that it is aware that inflation expectations are plummeting, it is aware that growth expectations are plummeting, and thus they should signal easing, not discuss some predetermined path about policy normalization, which was designed at a completely different stage of the economic cycle. And this system that we have right now keeps them from doing that and forces them to be behind the curve. They should actually now signal easing, if you ask me.
Okay, let's switch gears to talk about Japan. Fresh economic data out today that shows household spending was actually up. It increased for the first time in 6 months. But there is an asterisk there because of that extra leap year day. What do you make of the numbers that came out today? What does that tell you about where Japan stands right now?
Well, the numbers that are released at any given point in time, if you take them per se, are not that important in our philosophy. Again, we look at longer-term trends. And as far as Japan is concerned, in regards to the backward-looking data, if you look at the average trend in nominal aggregates from about 2012 to 13, Japan is doing actually quite well. Basically, all items of GDP were growing at around 0 for 20 years, and now they're growing somewhere between 1–2%, sometimes even more on a steady basis, whatever the number might be on a quarter or monthly, on a quarterly or monthly basis. So that's fine. But again, in Japan too, as in the US and in other markets, we have a modest but significant and gradual deterioration of forward-looking expectations. There is a question mark about inflation expectations going forward. And it is again in that context that the BOJ's most recent decision to kind of introduce negative interest rates without actually introducing them is really too weak. They need to signal that they are ready to do aggressive easing, that they have no concerns about negative interest rates. They should do it just like the Swedish or the Europeans do it. So we have the same kind of broader issue in all markets, which is that central banks need to be slightly more flexible in in signaling about that they respect the concerns of the market if you look ahead, not backwards.
So, Mikio, we've heard so much from many analysts who have said that, these central banks have really moved into dangerous territory with the negative interest rates, especially with the backlash at the BOJ. But you're saying that they need to move further with monetary easing.
Yeah, I think the problem is that they actually did not move into negative territory. As you know, if you actually look at the practical meaning of the decision, it is that only a very small proportion of the excess reserves, which nota bene is freshly printed money. It's money that the central bank prints and gives to the central bank. They still pay interest on that money, and that's the key reason why that money stays at the central bank and never enters the economy. So absolutely and most definitely, I'm mostly talking here of my own opinion, I must admit. We have a variety of opinions in our firm as well, of course. But in my opinion, they need to be much more aggressive, exactly like the Swedish, and more recently also the European Central Bank, and just go ahead and signal very clearly that they will stop paying a subsidy to banks for doing nothing. That is what what Japan needs at this stage.